its mission is to essentially scale Ethereum, but it's actually processing transactions at a scale much bigger than Ethereum. It's got long-term goals and it's a very serious project, which I think in this space counts for a lot.
Hello and welcome to the new episode of Gateway.fm podcast. At Gateway.fm we build custom rollups across different tech stacks, and in order for the project to choose the right one, it is important to understand the difference in technology, in architecture. And today we are diving into Linea stack to explore its advantages, its architecture, and the real-world applications it is the most suitable for. I'm thrilled to introduce our guest, Declan, the head of project in Linea. Declan, nice meeting you.
Thank you.
Before we dive into the technology, could you please introduce yourself, tell us about your experience, background, what actually brought you to the blockchain space?
Yeah, so I'm Declan, I'm head of product at Linea. What brought me into blockchain, I actually started my career in sort of autonomous cars, so very different industry, but we were looking at when you take a vehicle and today it's idle 95% of the time. What about when you could use that vehicle all of the time because you have driverless cars? And we thought of having automated taxis, and then you needed like a peer-to-peer payment system to actually manage the sort of interaction between the car and the person. And so we started exploring at a previous company like Bitcoin for payments and just like blockchains in general. Back then the technology was like totally not ready for something like this, but I caught the bug and dived deeper into it. And then sort of about 2018, I started to really lean into public blockchains, Ethereum in particular. I was very excited about ICOs and CryptoKitties and all the sort of scaling issues that Ethereum was having. I then spent a lot of time on the enterprise side, doing like private permission chains. So I thought that like the best way to sort of adoption for blockchains was on the enterprise back in 2018. It didn't really work out that way. There's a lot of like hurdles around scaling private permission chains we ran into. And then I got into zero knowledge and rollups and was asked to come and actually lead the product team at Consensus for rollups. And we were doing lots of stuff with enterprises, big banks, big institutions, helping them scale their private blockchain. And then we realized quite early on at Linea that like the better use of our time and impact would be to focus on ZK EVM, which is a public blockchain. So actually trying to scale Ethereum, which is a public blockchain. So for that long journey, I kind of saw, initially how these enterprises were kind of stuck still in their like siloed blockchains. And now it's really interesting because we've come full circle where like, they've actually able now, with new innovations on the platform itself, on the technology, but also on the application layer, like the enterprises can come and interact with public blockchains now through privacy and compliance. So it's been really kind of interesting to see the full journey of enterprises.
Yeah, pretty amazing background, pretty like solid track records.
Yeah.
So let's get down to Linea.
Yep.
For those who might be not familiar, could you introduce the project and its mission?
Yep. So Linea, its mission is to essentially scale Ethereum. It is a ZK EVM layer 2 rollup. So it's built directly on top of Ethereum. Essentially, it is another blockchain, but it's actually processing transactions at a scale much bigger than Ethereum. Okay, so it's able to process transactions at a fraction of a cent, in a very short space of time. So it's a much better user experience. And then what it does is it essentially rolls up those transactions. It sort of batches them together and then publishes them to Ethereum to maintain this sort of security and decentralization guarantee. The key thing about Linea is that it's still an EVM execution environment. So all of the developer experience that you get from building on Ethereum, all of the developer tools, all of the smart contracts and applications, you can literally take them and port them over to Linea like as is. So I often like to say that building on Linea is like it's like feeling like home for Ethereum developers essentially. Every Ethereum client is a Linea client, Bezu, Aragon, Geth, Nethermind. Every smart contract on Ethereum is a Linea smart contract. Every tool is a tool on Linea.
So it's a smooth transition, smooth scaling solution for Ethereum ecosystem.
Exactly, yeah. Anyone who's building on the EVM, which also is even outside of Ethereum. There's other chains that aren't necessarily associated with Ethereum, but they're still using the EVM tech stack, and those developers can still come and build on Linea.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. And the fact that the Linea, you call it Linea.
Linea, yeah.
Linea was developed by Consensus, so one of the major players in Ethereum ecosystem. How does this fact influence the overall development of Linea and its adoption rate?
Yeah, so in terms of its development, Consensus has been a big supporter of Ethereum since its very early days. Obviously, Joe Lubin is the founder of Consensus and was a co-founder of Ethereum. And so from day one, we were very focused on Ethereum. Like, the tech stack is EVM. We knew that we wanted to be a rollup on Ethereum. We didn't want to use external data availability providers. We were really committed to building and making sure that Ethereum scaled. And that kind of came from our founders' sort of philosophy of making sure that Ethereum was successful. In terms of the support that Consensus has given us, so Linea was sort of incubated inside Consensus. That has a lot of benefits, obviously. One is that Consensus is a brand name globally. So when it came to having different businesses and dApps and builders come to the platform, obviously they want to they know the reputation of Consensus is going to be it's got a lot of reputation, or the reputation of Consensus is very big.
So this connection brings you credibility to
yes,
Linea project.
Precisely, yeah. So yeah, the reputation of Consensus brings credibility to the platform. People know that it's not here for a short term, it's got long-term goals, and it's a very serious project, which I think in this space counts for a lot. And then also, practically speaking as well, there are other products inside Consensus that have helped to bootstrap the Linea ecosystem. So you have MetaMask, which still is the leading sort of crypto wallet.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, and so if you go into the MetaMask wallet, you'll see Linea is a default network. It's already sort of pre-installed, which makes the user experience for using Linea on MetaMask much easier. We also have a lot of support from Infura, which at one point was doing nearly half of all Web3 transactions, processing transactions. It's an RPC provider. And Infura has helped us to sort of bootstrap the operations of the Linea network. And then we also have a huge, actually, benefit is working closely with the Bezu team. So Bezu is an Ethereum execution client. So they've obviously got a lot of experience in processing blocks directly on Ethereum. And the Bezu team actually helped to be the sort of, or provide the software that build the blocks on Linea. And that turned out to be a really great partnership, because it's really difficult to build a good execution client. And so we really benefited from sitting virtually next door to the Bezu team, who could help make Linea way more performant in terms of processing transactions.
Yeah, that's good to have these collaborations with the leading teams in blockchain sphere. So regarding the ecosystem as a whole, there are so many L2 existing right now. How Linea position itself in this space?
Yeah, there has been a proliferation of layer 2s and rollups for sure. I would say there's still a handful of tech stacks that each rollup chooses to sort of operate its L2. And at Linea, we think about it in kind of two clear buckets. The first is the tech, and the second is the sort of ecosystem, go-to-market distribution kind of aspect. If we just focus on the technology, so Linea, again, is now pretty much the only sort of ZK EVM layer 2 that has handwritten its circuit. So I think Polygon is also handwriting their circuit as well for CDK, but the other sort of technology stacks like Scroll or ZK Sync, they've since sort of pivoted into a slightly different way of actually building the zero-knowledge circuit. And what this means is that if you handwrite the circuit for the ZK EVM, it's much more efficient. I often like to describe it as a ZK EVM is really fine-tuned for one thing only, and that is proving EVM execution. What some other teams in ZK have done is they've actually sort of pivoted to using what is like a RISC-V ZK VM, and that can prove many different types of smart contracts and execution, like C, C++, Rust, also EVM. But because you have to have this sort of generalization, it's not as efficient. It comes with some trade-offs, some advantages for ZK VM, but what we've done is making it very, very efficient to actually prove EVM, which means your users, for Linea mainnet or anyone using the tech stack, the operating cost is much lower. The other thing is Linea is the only fully EVM rollup. So what I mean by that is it's the only rollup, whether ZK or optimistic, you can take an Ethereum client and actually sync it to the chain. So you can take like vanilla, Bezu client, Geth, Aragon, Nethermind, you name it, and you can sync it to Linea because we kept the entire interface exactly the same. So it really is EVM equivalent, and that is not the case for any other tech stack today. Why is that good? It means that, like I mentioned earlier, everything just works like out of the box. There is no hidden gotchas in terms of having a different compiler. Really just essentially every developer tool as well just works perfectly instantly on Linea. And all of this sort of future performance improvements that, you know, we can introduce for the clients to make them more performant, execute more transactions. Because it's the same as an Ethereum, we can actually take that back to the layer 1. So we recently saw Ethereum increase its block target. And that makes a lot of sense because we're already putting a lot of performance improvements into the clients for layer 2, so we can just take that and then apply it back to layer 1. So on the tech side, you have this really nice symbiotic relationship with the layer 1 as well, benefit. And then on the ecosystem side, one of the big sort of differentiators for Linea mainnet, which is the sort of canonical use of the Linea tech stack, is we're seeing exclusive applications like the MetaMask card. So MetaMask have recently launched a sort of non-custodial card, which essentially turns your bank on chain. So you can
you can pay by your crypto in shops and supermarkets.
Exactly. Yeah, you can anywhere that accepts MasterCard, you can go and tap your card. It's Apple Pay, Google Pay. We just released a physical card as well. And yeah, like it's your USDC or any other spendable on chain can be used.
Yeah, that's really handy.
Really handy. And you also can earn, it's not just great for saving because you can perhaps save, yield-bearing stablecoin, which gives you a better interest rate than just like, a generic like stablecoin. But you can also get into like DeFi as well. So you have this whole permissionless innovation of DeFi where, when you're not actually spending, you can, for example, be lending. So you actually be earning yield there, like maybe it gets deposited into an Aave pool. Or you can even use Aave to get cheaper credit than you might otherwise. What credit card out there has 0.25% APR? None. Whereas you can get that on the MetaMask card due to DeFi. And again, the differentiator here is that this is exclusively on Linea mainnet. So every time you swipe your card to buy a coffee, it's a transaction on Linea. The user doesn't really know. It's all just abstracted underneath the hood, like it should be for infrastructure. This is a really powerful use case because payments is a great product market fit for crypto.
Yeah, that's true. But let's get to scalability issues. Like ZK is known to be more difficult to scale. So what technical challenges did you have to overcome in order to make ZK EVM scalable?
Yeah, so proving the EVM in a ZK circuit, is an immensely difficult task. It's taken approximately 4 years to completely handwrite the constraint system for all of the EVM opcodes and precompiles. So every single execution trace that you can create in the EVM, you have to build out this sort of constraint system that is then used by the proof to actually generate the zero-knowledge proof and be correct and sound and so forth. And that takes a very long time. It took us 4 years. That was probably the biggest challenge. And one of the reasons that many people decided not to build a ZK EVM because they thought, oh, we'll go for an optimistic rollup approach because it's a faster approach, but it's less secure. And it also has a worse user experience when you want to move between chains because the finality is slower. And other people took a sort of still a ZK approach, but they said, oh, the EVM is too unfriendly to prove. I'm going to try and prove a different type of VM. And so that was an approach that maybe someone like StarkNet took with Cairo. But then that introduces problems like trying to bootstrap a whole new developer ecosystem and smart contract language and tooling. So I would say just proving EVM was one of the biggest challenges. The other biggest challenge in terms of scalability is execution. So I mentioned earlier that we're very fortunate to work super close with the Bezu team, who have a lot of experience and knowledge around how to just scale the general processing of transactions. So ignoring the whole zero knowledge part, there's just how quickly and how many transactions can we take, put into a block and sort of spit out. And that's actually a really hard thing to do. So we worked really hard with the Besu team to kind of scale Linea. Linea, as it stands right now, can process 27.5 megagas per second, which is around 18 times more than Ethereum at approximately around 2-second block time, which is again 6 times faster than Ethereum. So this is the sort of scalability.
What is current TPS indicator? Transactions per second on Linea?
Yeah, so 27.5 megagas per second, let's say an average transaction is like 150,000 gas. We're looking at sort of, over 100 TPS, 200 TPS today, which again is sort of a bit more than that actually. So yeah, say again, so 27.5 megagas per second, 150,000 gas roughly on average per transaction. That comes out to probably around 250, 300 transactions per second. Obviously the target is like much higher than that. So we want to get to approximately 2 gigagas per second is the sort of medium-term target that we think we can achieve. At that point, you're getting to around 20,000 transactions per second, which is sort of the scale of something like a Visa, for a payment system on chain.
Yeah, that's a lot. Yeah. I would say that scalability limits are broken already for ZK technology. And that's what we are also doing at Gateway. Like we are developing the ZK in order to break the scalability limits and to make possible really big number of transactions per second. Yep. Nowadays we are seeing 30K requests per second to RPC, and we are good to go with this with ZK technology. It was inaccessible just a couple of months ago, and now we see it working. That's cool.
It's incredible. You make a really good point. There's, everyone focuses on the ZK, and then maybe you start to focus on things like execution throughput, just like simple block processing times. But there's all this other infrastructure that surrounds a rollup, such as the RPC, which, if not scaled properly, can also lead to sort of problems, right? Like if the RPC goes down, from a user's perspective, it almost feels like the blockchain's gone down. So making sure that you can scale the surrounding infrastructure is super important. Something that we recently worked on and released with the Besu team again was something called fleet mode. And essentially what we're able to do is, for RPC providers, you can provide a sort of what we call a state diff. So there is a captain who is the one actually processing the blocks. And then it can send sort of a state diff, which is essentially just the output of the state, to its follower nodes, which means they can have a super lightweight database, and they can sync in around 10 seconds. Sorry, not 10 seconds. They can sync in around 10 minutes. So you have this elastic scaling of RPC. So all these innovations really overall improve the general user experience or the transaction supply chain, all the way from the user to the blockchain.
Yeah, there are different components, and each particular component has to be optimized in order to make the solution work properly and on the required scale. How does Linea handle data availability? Is everything fully on Ethereum, or you integrate with other external data availability solutions like Celestia, EigenDA?
Yeah, so we use Ethereum for data availability, which makes us a true rollup. We use blobs, so we have this dedicated sort of data availability store on Ethereum called blobs. There is still...
Tell about blobs. What's that?
So when we think about data availability, it's essentially bandwidth. We need to make the data available, so nodes or even a proof can actually make sure that everything is valid and verify. With blobs, we post the data to the L1, and currently today you get a target of 3 blobs per block with a max of 6. The goal is to kind of keep scaling that, so we want to get to, in the upcoming hard fork Pectre, we want to double that to 6. And I think with Nielsen's law, where bandwidth sort of improves by around 50% every year, we can get all the way up to sort of 1,024 blobs per block eventually. But this is just rollups essentially storing their data on Ethereum, so then the nodes can actually verify that it's correct.
Yeah, thank you for clarification. It makes sense. We are recently seeing more discussion on shared sequencers to enable rollup interoperability. So what is your approach in Linea to this concept? Do you do first steps, or you are working in these directions?
Yeah, we are exploring shared sequencing primarily through the lens of based rollups and based sequencing. So shared sequencing is an interesting idea. Essentially, the problem is that we have all these different rollups and they somewhat feel like isolated islands. It's not the same user experience as when you're on Ethereum and you have this one single shared state, right? Like I can interact with different smart contracts. If you have on Ethereum in the same block atomically, you can have synchronous composability. Whereas when you introduce the rollup-centric roadmap and we have all these different L2s and rollups, you can't have that same user experience. If there's an app on one rollup and another, they can't atomically compose at the same time. You have to bridge, and that is not a good user experience. And so we had this idea of shared sequencing, like as an industry. The problem is that most shared sequencers, very similar to the issues that enterprise private permissions chains face when they want to introduce new actors, is that you need to have credible neutrality, because no one really wants to opt into someone else's shared sequencer, especially if there is, a new brand or a new token. And so we stayed away from shared sequencing until more recently, where people realized that Ethereum itself could be a shared sequencer. So actually, Ethereum validators themselves, the L1 proposer, could also provide the block building services for rollups. And this is what we call based sequencing. So with based sequencers, an L1 proposer could build blocks for multiple rollups at the same time, and it gives us back that sort of shared sequencing, synchronous composability. Now, there's a lot of challenges still to create a sort of performant, economically viable based rollup, especially one that offers the properties of synchronous composability, because then we need things like real-time ZK snark proving, which, again, the ZK is improving massively, but it's still got a while until we get to real-time proving, like within the magnitude of 12 seconds. Once we have that, then we could have essentially Ethereum be a shared builder or shared sequencer for all based rollups.
Interesting. Let's talk about private rollups. Many teams nowadays, they choose to build their own dedicated rollup, not to build their D app on already existing chain. So how does Linea support those teams looking for build their own rollup using Linea technology?
Yeah, so we recently started supporting more teams who want to build on the tech stack and launch their own layer 2 rollup. Recently, ENS, Ethereum Name Service, which has been a huge and important application on Ethereum focused on on-chain identity, they recently announced that Namechain, their layer 2, would be leveraging the Linea tech stack as well. We also had Status Network, so that's the same team that build the Nimbus client, which is an Ethereum consensus layer client that currently secures around 10% of proof of stake. They want to launch an L2, and they're going to be leveraging the tech stack. We've provided technical support to these teams to help them, spin up their new chains, especially because these are the first chains that are outside of the Linea team that are actually operating the tech stack. It's interesting to kind of guinea pig essentially the tech stack and see where the problems are for a new team to try and operate it. So we worked very closely with them. And the key thing for us has been anyone that wants to leverage the tech stack to operate their own rollup is that they should be looking to sort of contribute back to the open source code itself. Mm-hmm. So Linea is completely open source under Apache 2 license. And so we're already seeing this where some teams, they want to build a specific feature into the tech stack, and they can do that, and it could be under, say, a feature flag. And that means that they can then pioneer that feature in true open source fashion. One recent idea that a team had is to add sort of native yield. So your rollup actually has native yield, where the asset itself, due to perhaps restaking of the ETH that's in the escrow on the L1 bridge, you would earn a 5-6% yield on your ETH or USDC just using it on the rollup. And so that's something that another team could build, put as a feature into the Linea tech stack, launch it on their chain, and then later on any other sort of user or consumer of the technology could apply it. And so that's the sort of relationships that we're looking for from key infrastructure partners.
Yeah, nice. And if I already have a rollup built with another stack, how easy for me it is to switch to Linea stack, and what could be the reasons for doing this?
Yeah, interesting question. So we've not seen, there's not many examples of anyone really migrating tech stacks today. It would be possible if you had a production system with lots of, TVL and like already like a very large ecosystem. It would be more challenging because there's more risk and there's more external components that you would need to consider as part of the migration path. It is doable. Why would you want to do it? Because from a technology perspective, let's say you're building on optimistic rollups, or optimistic rollup technology stacks, you might want to move to be a ZK, and that's because you want to have stronger security guarantees for your customers. ZK relies on cryptography and maths, whereas these sort of legacy rollup technology stacks like optimistic rely on game theory and crypto economics, which isn't as secure. And you also have this issue with optimistic rollup technology stacks where the finality is, the latency to actually move off the chain is around 7 days. And with ZK, that can get down to minutes, if not seconds eventually. So from a capital perspective, the ability, if you're like a DeFi or focused on like DeFi for your rollup, and you want to make sure there's like smooth capital flows between your rollup and say Ethereum or even any other rollup, then ZK is going to be able to offer a much better user experience for you and your ecosystem. So that might be one reason you want to move to be essentially upgrade from optimistic to ZK would be one of the main reasons I could see people moving. And I think that will inevitably happen. I strongly believe that maybe by the end of 2025, definitely by 2026, all rollups will be ZK rollups. The other reason you might want to move to, say, different tech stack like Linea is because the roadmap for Linea includes high performance, so it's going to be able to process many transactions at a fraction of a cent, but it also has a clear path towards decentralization. And not many tech stacks today actually have a roadmap towards decentralization. And so if that's important as well for your ecosystem or for your use case, then there's actually a credible alternative there with options where you can, for example, maybe bootstrap with a single centralized sequencer, but then easily spin up your own decentralized set of sequencers on the layer 2 itself, all the way to being a based rollup as well, which actually leverages the decentralized sequencer set of Ethereum, which is the best that you can get on the market today.
Are there specific tools or maybe partnerships that help as technical proficient teams to build, deploy, and manage their rollups on Linea?
Yep. So we have a partnership with Gateway, who help different teams essentially leverage the Linea tech stack. So anyone that wants to spin up their rollup and focus more on their ecosystem and less on the actual operation side, they can leverage Gateway's platform as a service to essentially operate their rollup, but also have additional features as well that they might not be essentially interested to focus on themselves. So one of the biggest benefits of leveraging someone like Gateway is you don't have to worry about any of the operations and the infrastructure. You can really just focus on your go-to-market, like getting more users, having product market fit, exploring new use cases in crypto. And that's, as someone who's sort of built and operated, a chain, that I can tell you that's a huge sort of weight off your shoulders.
Yeah. Thank you very much. So what are some of the biggest Web3 projects that are currently building on Linea? Are there some examples that showcase the strengths of the network?
Yeah, so Linea, because it's EVM, it has a lot of the sort of blue chip EVM protocols, the likes of, say, Aave and Circle, USDC. So you have a very healthy DeFi and sort of payments ecosystem. There are some sort of emerging DeFi protocols, the likes of Mulder, which leverages ZK as well as a co-processor to provide a unified liquidity market across many different chains, ultimately settles on Linea mainnet. That's a really exciting protocol. ZeroLend as well, who are also exploring different sort of DeFi primitives that work really nicely with the MetaMask card. I do think that the MetaMask card is the sort of killer application or use case that really exemplifies the power of Linea, because a lot of institutions, they don't actually want to be doing payments on a chain that has slow finality. Linea has fast finality. It also is very cheap. So, every time you go and buy coffee or pay for a meal, you don't want to be spending, 5, 10, 50 cents on a transaction fee. That's not something we have, already with our card. So why would we pay it now? Linea is extremely cheap. So every time you swipe your card, the fee is essentially zero. It's negligible. But because we have this sort of fast finality, great user experience, a great developer ecosystem, that's where we're seeing all of these DeFi primitives come together to provide you essentially a non-custodial neobank. So with the card and all the DeFi, on Linea you can save, spend, lend, borrow, and get rewards as well. So not only when you spend would you get cash back through USDC on every purchase, but there's also like third-party rewards that you could win. And that's something we're seeing today, is that other projects actually recognize that a MetaMask user on the card is a really good user and will also offer them rewards in terms of cash back. Like they might give their tokens to the project. And so we're essentially seeing rewards in the region of like double-digit cash back, which is something you truly can't get on, like an Amex on Web2 today.
I should order one card for me.
Yes, yeah, you should get one. They're physical ones here as well. So that's, and actually another really interesting thing, I recently saw that in the EU, on Coinbase, you now have to sort of KYC to receive a certain amount of money from your Coinbase account to your non-custodial wallet. And the only people that would be able to receive this is actually MetaMask card users, because MetaMask card users, when you sign up for the card, you go through KYC. So you have this sort of on-chain data now where it says that this person has gone through the compliance of passing KYC. This is really interesting because then people know, like, oh, this person is a real person and I can send money to them. And so you're going to get even more rewards and have an even better user experience because you've gone through this process.
That's smart.
Yeah.
Smart system. And how does Linea attract new developers and new D-app to be built on the ecosystem?
Yeah, so we focus very much on grassroots projects and builders. So you have the sort of existing, what I like to call blue chip protocols, and they're very well established. It's a very different sort of relationship that we have compared to these sort of individual builders and small early stage teams. So for the small early stage teams, we run lots of hackathons. We put on a lot of bounties and try to help people just play with the technology as well. I think we're still at this early stage of crypto where we're trying to find more use cases, like more real use cases that bring value to people that make them want to come on chain. And so it's a case of that top of funnel, just working very intimately with these hackers and these individual builders who are leveraging the EVM and Linea's properties of being extremely fast and cheap, to see kind of what they can do. And particularly for us, for Linea mainnet, we're very much focused on DeFi and payments as like those use cases, because people can start to build on top of the Lego blocks of primitives that have already been established, like the KYC for the card user, or the fact that you have Aave and someone is able to sort of leverage their Aave USDC as a spendable on the card. You can plug into that as a builder. So that's the kind of support that we're trying to do, is show them what's possible and then just essentially guide these individual builders towards producing an application that brings more people on chain.
Yeah, having those Lego blocks ready to use, it's a good incentive for builders to come and start building on Linea.
Yep.
That's true. But speaking about broader ZK EVM ecosystem, what current challenges do you see and how do you address them in Linea? What do you do to solve these problems?
Yeah, problems in the wider ZK ecosystem. Wait, do you mean the ZK or just like ZK?
Just ZK EVM, maybe scalability, maybe something.
On the technical side?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think some problems that I foresee with the technical side for ZK EVM is decentralization, because most rollups today, in fact all rollups today, have what we call training wheels, which essentially are like guardrails to account for the fact that these systems are still maturing. And to get to our sort of final state, we need to have the ability to decentralize the L2s, and that can take different shapes. you can actually have a decentralized set of sequences on the L2, but establishing like a decentralized set of node operators, that's a real hard thing to do. Many layer 1 blockchains, it's taken them sort of years to kind of perfect the technology. It's been very purpose-built for layer 1s. You need to have economic security. So that's a challenging thing to do. Alternatively, you go for something like the base sequencing approach, which I believe is extremely promising because it creates a more natural relationship between the layer 2 rollup and Ethereum itself. But then the problems there are around economics, because if you're a based rollup today, you have to post more frequently the zero knowledge proofs and the blobs as well. And so you lose all of the benefits that we have on existing rollups like Linea, where we can play timing games and we can wait longer to batch more transactions and compress them and aggregate them. So we need to find a way that we can have decentralization that is still economically viable for the user and provides a good user experience. And I think that's the sort of next big milestone that a lot of the technology stacks, including Linea, are like really trying to focus on.
Yeah, I can definitely agree that user experience is quite important here. Until we get good user experience and we get new users onboarded, like real Web2 people using these DeFi tools, we can't really speak about mass adoption.
No.
So that's an important part of the journey that we need to complete.
Yeah. I would say we, as an industry, we prioritized the product roadmaps in the right way, where we focused on user experience first, even though the systems were still somewhat centralized for the rollups. So now it's just a case of actually decentralizing them, but maintaining the user experience. And so that's we need to keep pushing there. And I think there are incentives for some projects not even to take that next step, which is, and again, if it's a hard problem, it's going to make your economics worse. It's going to make the user experience worse by definition. Then you really have to have the right almost morals or product vision to actually try and implement it. And so that's something that we're really keen on doing for Linea Tech Stack.
Any particular major milestones you have in your roadmap for 2025 and beyond?
Yes, by the end of 2025, Linea should be what we call a stage 2 rollup. This stage 2 rollup essentially passes both the walkaway test and the insider attack test. So the walkaway test is, if the team operating the rollup was to walk away, would you as a user still be able to have control and security of your assets? And that actually gets you to what's called stage 1. Stage 2 is a step further, which, team operating the rollup tried to attack the rollup and sort of steal funds, could they get away with it? Okay, so that's the ultimate level. And so we want to get to a stage 2 by the end of the year. We also want to...
Will you be attacking your network?
No.
All the employees of Linea attacking Linea?
Yeah, it's interesting because so far, even though rollups could have this ability, perhaps, there's been no example of it happening. So it's all still based around things like reputation and trust. But that's not the world we're building towards. That's the world that we've come from. So we need to sort of take it a step further, and that's why getting to stage 2 is going to be really important. And I do believe it's practically, from an ecosystem perspective, it will be interesting because people feel more comfortable to put larger amounts of their assets on chain because the security assumptions then are the same as the underlying layer 1 Ethereum. So today we still see lots of people putting their assets on Ethereum. Adoption of rollups has been steady, but I don't think it will really reach that next phase of maturity until we reach stage 2 in terms of the rollup technology.
These are challenging tasks.
Yes.
And I wish you all good luck with those roadmap you have for the next year and beyond. And we at Gateway are here to support your users, the teams that would like to build on Linea. So we are very glad to collaborate with you on this.
Thank you. Likewise.
Thank you for coming. It was a very nice conversation.